Doctors in the US make too much money? And why is a guy not wearing a shirt bringing you this video? Well, it's because I'm not cold enough to wear a shirt, and I'm in great shape. So I think it's funny when people say doctors make too much money, and it's a little bit sad when you actually know the reality of the situation. Today I was looking at salaries of different doctors, because although I'm really trying to figure out exactly the specialty I want to choose, considering you have to do a 4 to 7 year residency, and afterwards you can't change your specialty unless you do another 4 or 7 year residency. I want to make sure that although I like the specialty, that it doesn't happen to be incredibly low paying, considering you have to do a 4 to 7 year residency on top of your medical school, on top of your bachelor's degree, and you're going to be in your mid-late 30s before you're making any real money. And you're going to have debt. So let's go back to the beginning. So as you might have just realized, it takes a lot of time before you can work as a doctor and make money. So people that hear doctors make $500,000 a year or $300,000 a year, and I hope that before taxes I make $500,000. And that's another thing, taxes. Like my wife, she was getting all excited when I was telling her, yeah, we could make up to like $40,000 a month each, if we're like really high-paying doctors. And then I mentioned, but that's before taxes. And she's like, well, how much are taxes? And you add up the state tax plus the federal tax, and you take into account your insurance and stuff for working as a doctor, and you're losing half your money. And that may sound like a lot. Well, you're still making $20,000 a month. Well, that's if you're at the very top. So let's say you're not at the very top, you're just average. Well, now you're only making about $10,000 a month. Well, that's still good money, $10,000 a month. Man, that's more money than I make. Well, guess what? If you were to work as, say, a police officer, a manual laborer, a longshoreman, something like that, right out of high school, starting at the age of 18, you could make pretty simple. I don't know if all manual laborers can make similar money, but let's use police officer as an example. I know it's not a popular job nowadays, but it's a great example of a job that you can go in right after high school and make good money. There are a lot of jobs like this, but they've become less popular because people have in their minds that they have to go to university and pick one of very few jobs, while there exist tons of jobs that are more like trades that people don't want to do anymore. Air conditioning repair. How come nobody does that? You never hear kids saying, I want to be an air conditioner repairman, but they make really good money. So let's say you, right out of high school, go into more of a trade job or police officer, and you make $10,000 a month. You are making that money from the age of 18, and first of all, you're young enough that you could still live with your parents comfortably without it impeding your life too much. Because reality is, you do not want to be living at home with your parents when you're 30, or else it's really going to screw you up. 18, you could certainly squeeze a few more years out of that. Like, it'd be nice, the best, if you move out. Even if you move out, you're 18 years old, you don't need a very big place, you rent a bedroom, you keep your expenses low, and you can save most of your money. The bottom line is, you start working when you're 18, or say 19, even 20, you save a lot of your money and you invest it. And by the time you're 25, 30, 35, or let's just say by the time you are, so how old will I be when I can work as a doctor? So I can work as a resident when I'm 29 years old. It'll probably actually be like 30. And I'll make a whopping $5,000 a month, maybe. And by the time I am like 36, 37, then I'll start making the real money of, after tax, $10,000 to $20,000 a month. That's at 37 years old. That means I lost about 20 years of investing. Imagine you were making even just $5,000 a month from the age of 18, and you could save $4,000 a month. That's almost $50,000 a year you could invest. And think if you even just saved that money, $50,000 a year for 20 years. That's a lot of money. That's $1 million. $1 million. So even if you only saved your money that whole time, you'd have $1 million. And imagine, after that 20 years, if you invested $1 million, how much it would grow. Now think if you just invested it from the beginning and it's growing, even if it was just a few percent each year, you're going to have, if you invest wisely, you're going to have millions of dollars by the time I finally make more than $5,000 a month. It's really by the time I will make any money, and by the time, most people who work as doctors are going to be in the negative until they're about 40 years old, considering that there's a good chance they have debt from their first university, and there's a really good chance they have debt from their second university. And when you're only making $5,000 a month, and you're in your 30s, and you've been living as a student for a while, most of them probably aren't going to live really lowly much longer, and slowly pay off a bit of that debt. They're going to start living higher. So they're going to be still in the negative for, let's say, a decade more. And let's say they don't want to raise their standard of living, and they live very meagerly. Well, you're still going to be like 30, you're still going to be 35, 40 years old at least before you're in the positive. So you will be 35 or 40 years old with pretty much no money. And someone who just took a $5,000 a month job right off the bat and invested their money in just okay investments. I'm not talking about crazy investments that skyrocketed. Just okay ones. They're going to have millions of dollars of passive income. Well, it's not millions continuously coming in, but, they've got assets worth millions of dollars. They could probably support them. Think about this. You can buy, depending on where you buy the houses, you could buy a couple houses, you could buy 10 houses. It depends on where you buy them. But say you even just bought houses with your money. That's a lot of money you've got coming in each month. Let's say you invested your money and you got to 35, 40 years old. Let's say you got to 37 years old, and now you've got, let's just be conservative here and say you got $2 million. And you buy, now I'm not a real estate genius, it's probably a better idea to buy like multiple small places, but because I know the prices in California, which is very expensive, and multiple small, cheaper places. I don't know, probably big cities, small places is best. Once again, I'm not a real estate genius, but say you were to buy $2 million houses in California with your $2 million. You're going to get like $10,000 a month probably. And that's like, you got those houses paid off because you had $2 million and you just completely bought them. Now imagine if you don't just buy them outright, which is, not the best financial decision probably. Now let's say you got 4 houses that you have payments on, but you're renting them out. So your rent money is paying for your payments, and then you're clearing $3,000 per house. You got 4 of them. That's $12,000 a month, or maybe you're clearing, I don't know how much money. Let's just, because the previous example came out to like $10,000 a month, this one came out to like $12,000 a month. You're making a lot of money doing nothing. Meanwhile, if I'm an average doctor, I'm making that same money, except I have to work quite a lot for it. And I was living as a student for the previous 20 years. Now, you were also living meagerly because you were saving your money. So I guess that part we can do equal if this example is to be very accurate. And it really goes to show you that doctors aren't making that much money. Now, of course, every year I work after age 37 to 40, I'm bringing in a good amount of money. But guess what? If you bought those houses, you're bringing in that same amount of money and not working. Guess what? You can continue to work while you bring in that money from your houses. And now you're making more than an average doctor. There's so many different life paths, and yeah, working as a doctor is really not as lucrative as people believe. Now, there is one reason why it's perhaps more lucrative for a lot of people. It's because sadly, it's an easy black or white, follow the guidelines, stay within the ropes, like you're in an amusement park and they have ropes for like where you should walk. As long as you walk inside them and you pass all your classes, you move on to the next year and the next year and the next year, and then you get your residency and then you do your next thing, and you don't have to do any thinking. You don't have to figure out what's going to work, what's a good decision. All you have to do is read the book. Remember, salbutamol is a beta agonist. And you write that on your test, or you write that, you pick some random medical thing and you memorize it and you repeat it. And that's all you have to do. And you get your medical degree, you go through your residency, and you've got your job. Whereas the other example, the investments require a little more cognition, not just automation and like being a robot remembering everything. Now, I'm not saying that it is not work to remember the stuff for medical school, to remember the stuff for your first degree. It's work. Is it difficult? No. Is it hard? It can be. What, difficult? No, hard? It can be. By difficult, I mean, is it actually difficult to figure the stuff out? No, because you don't have to figure out anything. That's the sad part. You're just memorizing. I mean, that's what everyone in medical school does. Not to brag, but I actually love the human body, and I think about it all the time, and I work things out in my head, and I verify them. I don't just memorize stuff and go, well, this does that, based on that I read this for 5 minutes last night. I mean, they probably spend more time reading, but it always gets me when we're discussing things in class, and a student will, raise their hand and jump in and interject, but this does that. It's like, the first time you ever saw this material in your life was last night. You spent an hour of your life learning this, and now you are racing to interject to say how it works. You have no clue what you're talking about. There's a huge difference between really knowing something and having intensively studied it and thought about it and experimented with it for years or decades, and your last night reading assignment, which you spent an hour on and you memorized, and now you know what it does. But that's a sad reality. But in terms of work and time and money, working as a doctor is not much more lucrative than really any other average job. And maybe your natural instinct right now is to go, but doctors make so much money. Well, just remember what I said. If you made $5,000 a month and you saved most of your money and lived like a doctor lives until they make actual money, you would make just as much money as a doctor by the time they're making money without working from your investments. So if you live like most doctors live until they are 37 or so years old, 35 to 40 years old, if you live very meagerly and save all your money and live like a student, like a poor student until you're 35 or 40 years old, you will actually be ahead of the average doctor. Now, if you make above average investments, you will be ahead of the higher doctor. Now, if a doctor is like the best doctor in the world, he's going to probably make better money than you. Well, if you're really good at investments and you make some of the best investments in the world, you're going to be way ahead of him. Point is, if you make $5,000 a month and you live the way most doctors live until they are 35 to 40 years old, you will be doing better than doctors, and you can retire by the time a doctor has to start working. That's some good food for thought. Now imagine if you made $10,000 a month working as like a police officer, a longshoreman. Yeah, don't come saying how doctors are so lucky and so rich. As long as you use a little bit of thinking, you can be way